It's the Progress Pod, a production of the Franklin County Coalition for Progress.
I'm Pete Mazzoni with Jeremy Kate. Quote, "These times are truly unprecedented and silence is acquiescence. Black Lives Matter, period, full stop." These are the opening words of our guest, Matt Fogal, a Republican who has served the county's district attorney since 2009, in a statement to Franklin County citizens. It goes on to say, "I confess, when I first heard that phrase, my immediate reaction was that all lives matter. I was wrong and part of the problem. For white Americans, please understand that what you are being asked to meaningfully consider is the unique experience of Black lives, our fellow Americans. It is not enough to avoid being a racist. I humbly submit that it is likewise not enough to be anti-racist. It is about actual, meaningful change." To Franklin County demonstrators of this past week, thank you. My office is not far away from the demonstrations in Chambersburg. I purposely left my window open and heard you. I also heard those motorists honking support all week. This is America, and you have performed a very American act. America weeps with you for the appalling murder of George Floyd and what it represents. I encourage you to continue in this positive spirit of change and equality and to not abandon this momentum. Demand that our national and local leaders authentically confront institutional racism. Moreover, expect and demand that they actually do the necessary hard work to finally correct our shamefully failed promise of equality for all citizens. In the midst of this ugly political climate of division and tribalism, thoughtfully choose only those leaders that unite us rather than divide us. On June 1st, 2020, both the United States military and the Holy Bible were grossly misappropriated. An American hero and patriot, General Jim Mattis, was moved to eloquently comment. He was 100% correct in every single sentiment he delivered, and I proudly stand with him. For my fellow Republicans, I encourage you to exhibit political courage and never put the party before the country or conscience. In union, there is strength. In November, we must vote. We must unite, one team, one fight. May God bless the United States of America. Thanks for coming on the show today, Matt. We really appreciate it. These are some very powerful words you're sharing with the public. My first question would be, what kind of reaction have you gotten?
I have received an enormous outpouring of positive support, and I have received support from people from all different political affiliations, and I have to tell you, I have not received any direct, at least negative comments. It's been nothing but support and along the lines of what I was trying to say, of unity and healing.
What motivated you to make this statement? You start out saying that all lives matter and you were wrong. So what changed for you?
Well, so the statement was several paragraphs, and I support equality. I support free speech. I support the United States military. I support the Holy Bible and the concept of unity. And so that's what was in my letter. And so the some of the comments that I've heard about it takes courage or whatever to do that, I honestly, I don't necessarily comprehend where that's coming from. Maybe naively, I suppose, but I don't often make a statement like that publicly as a DA. I've tried to inform the public when necessary, as related to my job specifically, as it relates to laws or cases and the like. And I haven't often used, I guess, a bully pulpit, I suppose, if you will. But I was motivated by many things, and obviously and naturally the events of George Floyd's murder, and then everything I've witnessed following that. And so leading with the three words, Black Lives Matter, was important to me because, from my own personal perspective, I think that a lot of the tribalism that I later spoke about in the letter has created a society we live in now where people can't listen and can't be thoughtful. And so I wanted to start with that and kind of encourage everybody to be thoughtful and meaningful and self-reflective. And so this moment feels different to me. We've had other moments like this. Unfortunately, over the course of my lifetime, I've witnessed similar national events that have resulted in demonstrations, unfortunately. And so this most recent with the murder of George Floyd, I'm obviously very busy at my work, but I'm also a citizen, and I try to stay informed and have watched the news and listened and observed. And so there's a lot of things have happened, and what I've seen sort of evolve, I guess, is this different spirit. I feel like, personally, from what I'm witnessing, what I'm discerning from this with an open mind, is more unity than I've seen previously, at least that I've witnessed. Maybe it's been there and I haven't, witnessed it or been able to or whatever. But I see something different now. I think this is a different moment, and a positive moment, if you will, in terms of the aftermath maybe leading to some better result, some better changes of heart and awareness. And so just the events themselves and witnessing and literally having my window open and listening and observing, as I said, a very American thing, and trying to be as reflective as possible. And certainly in that last paragraph, the events of June 1st, obviously I had a visceral reaction to that. And I don't say a lot of things publicly about politics necessarily. I suppose that's a political statement, I guess. And I do think it is linked with the first two paragraphs. I think it all is sort of intertwined. There's this environment right now that we're in, that we saw a man murdered over an extended period of time on a video, which is, maybe different than some of our prior events. And then we saw, we're living with a worldwide pandemic, the COVID-19 event that has shaped sort of our behaviors and our connectivity with each other. And that's a dynamic that's sort of part of all this. And then we have the events in Washington, D.C., the current climate that's been created over some time. And so I think, there may be other things, but for me, those are three things that are maybe a little different and distinct right now. And the events of that day, June 1st, I thought had to be included because it to me is an example of this misappropriation and sort of pro-division, which is, for me at least, the exact opposite of what our nation needs right now.
So specifically, June 1st, you're talking about the Lafayette Square incident?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so, as it's been reported in the media, chemical irritants were used to disperse a peacefully protesting group, allowing the president to have a photo opportunity, my understanding. And that was a bridge too far for you.
Yeah, so yes, the comments of mobilizing active duty military forces for our cities, then along with the walk over to the church and then the photo op was troublesome to me, to say the least. And so I'm motivated right now mostly to listen and to help heal our community. I'm a very small fish in a small pond, and I struggle with the idea of actually releasing this statement, only in that I don't have the hubris to think that everyone needs to hear what I think about everything or anything. So I honestly, it's sort of my wiring. And so I struggle with the idea of, who is this guy now? He wants to say something and he wants attention, and I absolutely don't. But I do have an office that I hold, and I serve the citizens here. And I felt compelled in terms of duty and obligation to speak on it. The military is something I have experience with. I don't need to speak a lot about that or wear it on my sleeve. My faith is certainly very dear to me, and it's not something likewise that I wear on my sleeve or I'm very public about. But for those people that know me, I said I didn't really perceive any idea of courage that was needed to do this, because people that know me here, whatever political affiliation, should probably guess that when General Mattis says something, and General Powell and Allen and others, Matt's
there's
probably
a lot of voices chiming in.
Matt's probably going to be standing in that same line with those fine patriots. And so that's sort of the motivation. I as I said, struggled with the idea of not wanting any focus on me, but certainly whatever I can do to help in the middle of this. And again, as I see as sort of out of a horrific event, maybe something positive shaping our country. And so if I can add to that, that's fine. And further, starting with the three words, Black Lives Matter, and I, as you just read that, I explained sort of my history with that statement. And obviously there's lots of talks about police and police operations and brutality and the like. And so as an elected DA, obviously I work very closely with the police. I love the police, and we work together in our particular community. Police here and nationwide are horrified by what happened. And we're all going to have these conversations going forward. Deeds matter much more than words. So I sent my letter, and I'll do a podcast, I suppose, and maybe talk to a couple reporters and then get on with the work. And I'll do that rather privately and with some connectivity person to person. But using those three words to me weren't just provocative necessarily, although they certainly, I guess, are getting attention just because of my party affiliation or job. And I understand there's maybe some history when those words started, but there's lots of images that we've seen over the last several days and couple of weeks. And there's one I'm sure many people have seen of a young black girl who's got a sign that says Black Lives Matter. Let me pull it up here. Her sign says, "We said Black Lives Matter. We never said only Black Lives Matter. We know all lives matter. We just need your help."
Right.
We need help with Black Lives Matter, for Black lives are in danger. And so I see this image of this girl. She's got sunglasses on top of her forehead. And I see her face, and I think of her and countless other young girls and boys like her in our community. And she's saying, "Can't you just say the words?
Yeah.
Why can't you just say the words? What is it that you can't say the words? Because it would really help me if you said the words. And it bothers me that you don't." And so I will always look into that young girl's eyes and, figuratively, and say, "You matter, young lady. And don't ever let anybody tell you don't."
No, that's the right thing to say. I would say on, whether releasing the statement's hubristic, I would say this is what the community needed to hear, specifically from you, that we needed to know that you stand with all of us. And I think what you did represented your office and you personally very well. So that's my comment on that. And let's move on to making changes. As you mentioned, we've been down this road many times, The calls for reform come out. A terrible tragedy has to occur. There's rioting, there's protests, but nothing really changes. From your perspective, what would be a place to start?
So I'm going to give another long answer, sorry, but it's sort of required. I think it was 5 years ago. I gave very similar comments that were technically, aside from the third paragraph, very similar comments that were public in nature, but not necessarily covered by the media. And so that was 5 years ago. And at the time, what I had said, and this was a post-Ferguson time, and, we had been having discussions nationally about body cameras and the like. And so my statement was about the way we do our jobs. A part of that needs to be, and I said a lot of things to preface this. I set up with a lot of my feelings about, similar to what I just said about this young lady in the photo now. There's a similar photo back then, actually, as I think of it, that moved me. And so part of that, in terms of results, was a protocol regarding body-worn cameras here, a protocol regarding eyewitness identification procedures, a protocol related to recorded interviews. And the theme of that was not only a race issue, it was in the middle of a bigger race discussion. It was a public confidence in criminal justice issue, I suppose, as well. And as I said, that was about 5 years ago. And so now we're here again, and there's still more conversation about, obvious conversation given what precipitated our discussion with a police officer murdering a citizen. Necessarily, there's been focus on police and police interaction, and how that can change or be defunded, as is being discussed now. And so, in terms of local law enforcement or policing or criminal justice, I heard someone say recently that this is someone at a demonstration saying this isn't about policy change, it's about heart change. And I thought that was pretty powerful. And obviously fundamental to what's happening or has been happening in our country for hundreds of years, quite frankly. So am I Pollyanna? No. Can this generation maybe be the one that finally heals and removes, or at least redresses this stain on our history? I hope so. And so to focus right now with all of this positive energy and spirit that I'm hearing and seeing, to focus solely on law enforcement or police or criminal justice, I respectfully submit is going a little small. And I think that there's a bigger potentiality to address the overall spirit and heart issue, and also some more fundamental issues related to opportunity, related to education, healthcare, and the like. I think that I would encourage everyone to not only look at law enforcement and criminal justice, but to use this moment to go big and fundamentally look at opportunity, and most all police interaction. And I wrote this in a questionnaire the ACLU sent a few years ago. Most police interaction is with citizens who are in a lower socioeconomic strata, and so the question is, why is a particular race disproportionately represented in an economic strata? And so it's a bigger, tougher issue, right?
That's a big one.
So
that's a really big one.
But let's have the discussion, and let's listen to everybody, and let's be civil. Let's have what are going to be necessarily difficult conversations all the way around, and but they need to be meaningful and healthy and candid and open-minded and unifying in purpose. And so I feel like there's a bigger opportunity here, I guess is what I'm saying, than limited to things like defunding departments and the like.
Well, let's talk about defunding the police, because the nomenclature is completely misleading. Defunding the police is more about redirecting money to, let's say, start with social services. Police officers aren't trained in social services. Do you see some of this being a part of change that might happen in our community? For instance, you give the example of a lot of the interactions are with lower income people who don't have necessarily access to social services who need them. Is this something you're willing to consider as far as budgeting and the police?
Yeah, I think that's fair what you said about sort of the misleading or misinterpreted nomenclature. I think that it's interesting. I just said this recently too. I think within this year at one of our criminal justice advisory meetings, where I said that, we hear from the state, we hear from the nation's capital about criminal justice and, oftentimes tied to grant funding and the like. And we're told, you need to do this or that with addiction, with mental health, with education, those types of things. And so oftentimes county levels are asked to explore those types of things when it comes to jails and a specific population of individuals that are in a county jail. And so my comments at the time, which were pretty passionate, were that why do we talk about these issues when someone's in jail? And
right.
And why do we ask a DA, and why do we ask a judge, why do we ask a police chief to deal with these major societal issues?
All right, they're the wrong people.
If we really give a damn, we'll fund these other areas. So I agree with that, and I have said that. And so, I think that a police officer is not trained to be an addiction specialist, a mental health worker, a social worker.
No, and to your point about the bigger question, I mean, that there is some reform has to happen at the police level, but that reform has to carry out through many other layers.
Right.
So let me ask about something that we witness over and over in these videos. De-escalation. How can they be trained? How can police officers be trained to learn to de-escalate? I mean, we've all seen these situations where they go from zero to a dead body in no time at all. Is that something that can be changed?
Yeah, so I can draw on my experience, my life experience, as we all do. It's we're humans, and that's what we do. So, and I've experienced currently in the last 11 or so years as a DA, working very, very closely with police officers. I have my own background with some military deployments and training, and actually part of that is being a military policeman. So, I believe I was deployed when Abu Ghraib broke, when that story broke.
Oh, wow.
And I was in Afghanistan. I believe I might need to. It might have been a different controversy at the time, maybe a burning of a Koran by a soldier or abuse of a corpse or something. But those types of things have happened where soldiers or service members have not upheld the honor of the military code of ethics, and therefore myself in the same uniform in a deployed environment certainly was shocked and angry that now I know that I'm going to be seen. I have that same uniform, and so
you're the enemy, 100%.
I'm the enemy, and now that's going to be directed at me. And where I'm at in Afghanistan, people are upset about it, and they see me, and so that informs me. I'm in a civilian role now, however, working very closely with police, and I can empathize with the position they're in. I know police here very well. We're a very tight-knit group within law enforcement. It's a family atmosphere and relationship, and it's confounding, as I hope you can imagine, just like I felt as a soldier, not even able to understand how those soldiers could have done that at Abu Ghraib, or burned a Quran, or abused a corpse. And so now they have to confront that. And so, as if their jobs are hard enough, they have to try to counterbalance the atrocities that everyone's witnessing on the screen. And so, police are trained in de-escalation is the thing, and that's the confounding thing. And police departments will continue to do their very, very hard work, and follow what they already have as their protocols, and I hope there is not a next event, but
yeah, me too.
There is a final report regarding the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing that came out in May 2015 that I happen to know. For example, our local Chambersburg Police Department follows very, very closely. And I would say that our policing in this county, in a lot of respects, is fairly progressive. You may be familiar with our co-responder program regarding mental health that's all over the county. That's a partnership with mental health providers where in the appropriate situations, police should not be responding to those. They should be maybe liaisoning as necessary, but then handing off to an appropriate mental health provider. We do the same in the field of addiction, and which is something we're still in the middle of an epidemic of. All of this.
The amazing thing is it's just one thing upon another this year.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about something that's being brought up a lot, qualified immunity. Is this something you feel should be removed, and thus exposing the police to maybe criminal or civil liability?
Well, I'll be honest with this. That's one thing that I haven't given a lot of thought to. I do think that we need to have these conversations, and we need to be serious and thoughtful and thoroughly analyze each of these. And so, is that possibly something that needs to be amended? Yeah, that can certainly be something that's on the table. The reallocation of some resources, or I guess reallocation of responsibility, I guess is a better way of putting it. That's another thing. I've heard also mentioned school policing, maybe being revised or the like. Unions. There are a lot of things that I'm sure you've heard of as well. And so I don't think that anything that I just mentioned should be automatically off the table for discussion. And so it's got to be a serious, thoughtful discussion too.
Sure. So to the question of the bad apples argument, we hear the stories of the police who aren't good, are known bad actors in their departments, like evidently this man in Minneapolis, Derek Chauvin, had a long and sordid history, yet remained on the force. As a regular citizen, what are we to make of this?
There is an interesting thing, and I presume you imagine that this is something that I've internalized. Every police officer who's not that officer in Minneapolis has had to internalize and consider. And then again, each and every time this has happened over the last numbers of years. And so, yeah, the question is how does it happen? How is that possible? And what were there signs? And it certainly sounds like there were with this particular officer. And so it's as I said, confounding to many police officers everywhere as to how this happens. And oftentimes, I guess what comes to me is that there's been I've had, as I said, a lot of outpouring of support, which has been very, very moving and well received by me, obviously. And so a lot of it talked about courage or leadership. And so I do believe that leadership is just an entirely necessary part of running a police department, which is an entirely obvious statement to say, but it's not just something to say, it's something to exercise with a lot of care and to do it well. And to not, so a chief of police or a lieutenant or sergeants, corporals and the like, they're not just leaders because they have the rank. Leading is a verb, so it's not just to have the position, but to actually be a leader and make sure that any type of misconduct is not permitted. Certainly something as grave as this. And so I've been around, I've been talking with all of the chiefs and line officers as well the last few days. I mean, we have a rapport already, and in light of my letter, and I wanted to see if we could start the conversations and keep going forward. Deeds matter more than words. And so, in fact, this morning, I had a conversation with the chief, and we were talking about there's so many similarities between the military and the police department in the sense of this. And I guess I should be careful saying that in the sense of this. In the military, every soldier, in my experience, is instructed that no matter what your rank is, you have the authority to not obey an unlawful order, for example, or to call out something that's unsafe. And that's a cultural thing within the military that I'm personally aware of that is just so foundational and so understood and so embedded into the idea of being a soldier. And I believe that is or should be, if it's not, a likewise code within the police department, that no matter what your rank, when something like that is happening, you have the ability to stop it, and no matter what your exact
it almost sounds like you're addressing the situation where the other officers, in the case of Mr. Floyd's murder, were kind of passive observers of his misconduct.
Right.
And so in police culture, that military ethic doesn't exist.
No. Don't get me wrong. No, I'm sorry. No, it does. It goes back to my point of leadership mattering so much. And again, leadership is not a title. Leadership is character, and it's hard work. It's setting the standard and the example, and continuously being dedicated to it, so much so that it is cultural, and it's not something that even needs to be thought about. It is it's not a crossroads moment where someone has to make a decision. It's just embedded. It's something you don't even really have to think about. And so it's up to the leaders to set that tone and to maintain it and sustain it, and to incorporate other viewpoints that maybe have not been incorporated previously. I know Chambersburg Police Department, again, just met with the chief this morning, and I know they have been very much so leaning forward in implicit bias training, for example, and that's been going on for some time. And I'm limited to my knowledge of what I see every day here in Chambersburg. I think there is a distinction, it appears, from a rural area like we live in, and a smaller population. There's obvious differences between that and say a Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and a bigger city. There's obvious distinctions, but then there's just, it seems like this sort of thing, this sort of awful interaction between police and citizens is often in that sort of a metropolitan area. And so I don't know, I'm not suggesting I know what that means or what the precise difference is. I think that's part of these conversations going forward. I know the Chambersburg Police Department obviously serves this town I sit in now in my office, and they have been leaning forward with many initiatives, and so the reforms that are necessary. It's interesting. We have to be open and candid. And Chambersburg, for example, has been already, and they will continue to do so. I'm assured of that. But many of the policies and procedures that are being requested to be, done in these national conversations, a lot of departments have already adopted.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know we had limited time with you. As a member of this community, what you did makes me proud to be a member of this community. So personally, I want to thank you for that. Thank you so much for your time, Matt. Keep up the good work, and we'd love to have you on the show again soon.
Hey, thank you so much. One team, one fight.
There you go. Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Jeremy here. Let me jump in to say find us online at progresspod.org, and if you'd like to send us an email, it's progresspod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.